Now I'm going to show you two ways of adding colour to this pear. The first one I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply add colour on top of this grayscale. It's an approach that people would use traditionally in oil painting, which is called indirect painting, where it's done over several sittings. So we do the outline, block in the darks, build up a grisaille, which is a grayscale, and then add colour onto it. So I'll do that first of all, and then I'll do another demonstration which is just going in purely straight off with the colour, so a direct method. So what I need for this is I've got a range of pastels here. I have greens, so I have a very dark green, cool green, which means it tends towards blue. I have a middle green, which is quite, I suppose it's quite neutral, that. And then I've got a very light, warm green, which is very strong. I have a few colours set aside for the pattern as well. The decoration that we see on this, which is kind of an ochre colour. So I've got a burnt umber, a raw umber, I've got a middle value and a light value. And that's the great thing about pastels. You can buy individual pastels in different values. For my darks then, I can use the umber, but I've also got an ultramarine to mix up a black. And then I have some very light values here. So I have some warm yellow, very light, that I might use for a highlight. And I've got some more neutral whites. So not pure white, but I think it's a very light umber and a very light ochre. Okay. So those are the pastels I'm going to work with for now. Later on I can always bring in a whole other range of things, but I need to base it around its local colour first of all. So I might go in for the shadow first. Take my my burnt umber, and the approach I'm going to use for this is I'm going to use hatching so that I don't lose all the work I've done underneath. It also creates a nice movement in pastel. It gives a lovely effect, and it's very specific to pastel. It's very difficult to get this this effect in oil. So you can see straight away that's darkening it down. I'm going to come up and do the stalk, and then I might just push that slightly with the blue. It doesn't always need it. Do I have any other real darks? Yes, I do. I have a crevice shadow under here. Or a dark accent. I have a bit of detail there, which is the bottom of the pear. I have a little bit of dark accent on this side of the stalk as well. Are there any other real darks in there? Not really. Let's go on to the green. So we're using observation and theory at this point. So our terminator is going to be the darkest green. And we can see exactly where it is from our theory. Let's go over now onto the middle green, which is what we're going to see in the shadow. And we're going to see it on that soft transition between the terminator and the light family. Now the great thing about pastels is you can use two pastels to create one colour. So coming over into our, just going to break some of this light green pastel. You can see it's a very soft pastel, a Sennelier, so literally it falls apart on you. You have to be very careful working with this. In fact, this is what often happens. We end up with just a box of dust. So I'm going to pull in this lighter green. This is where it's important not to have too much pastel on the underpainting, because otherwise we don't have any tooth left on the paper to accept this pastel. Now this beautiful bright green, I'm going to be very, very careful with it. Okay, I might get a small bit of it in the reflected light. Okay, we're getting quite a strong effect on that now. Working from theory, much stronger than we see on the pear itself. But that's okay, it's easy to soften it down after. It's very hard to make light up when we haven't put it in, so better to go more severe and then soften it down as I'm doing here. So just a hint of that terminator in there, and that seems to be working quite well. I'm going to lift up this light family now a little bit stronger. So as I said, there's two ways of lightening something. We're losing a light pastel on a dark background. I can push harder to some point, or to some degree, and then I need to come in with a lighter pastel. So you can see the highlight just in there. I'm going to put in with a light yellow because it's a yellow light. Okay. And it might be an idea now to go on towards the background. So I've set in my shadow here, I've set in a shadow here. I need another colour for this shadow. The grey I used actually is fairly good. What we're looking for is a cool middle value. Here's a nice colour, it's blue, but its chroma is not very strong, so it's slightly toned down. It's not an intense blue like this one. So while the value might be similar, it's a much softer, more muted colour. So I'm going to pull some of that in for the shadow, knowing that it's going to fade out. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with the lighter, warmer, which means more towards the yellower whites. So not yellow, but yellowish whites. And then we can soften this shadow in a little bit. I'd be fairly happy with that so far. It was a good stage to stop, take a break. We've done the block in. And now I'm going to look a little bit at the pattern and texture that we see on it. So I'm going to go in for these other ochres that I have. It's quite similar to the paper colour. There we have a lighter one, we have a darker one, and we have a very dark one. So obviously the darker parts of the pattern are going to be in the dark, in the shadow areas. And it's a lot like a view of the Earth from space. We've got continents and islands, so it's a good way to think of it. Continent over here, one large continent going right the way around, and then little islands coming off. So islands more towards the top. And I mean, this really isn't essential to the pear. The pear looked, or the drawing of the pear looked great before we did this. It's just adding a little bit of texture and decoration to it. Now what I need to do is add a little bit more light very gently around these. Okay. And obviously reflected light is going to be picked up in the brown pattern as well. I'd be fairly happy with that. It's got a nice loose character to it, it's not overworked. Haven't done any blending yet. I'm not against blending, but it does tend to dull down the texture of the paper. Makes it for a much more lifelike, realistic effect. Softer transitions. But personally, I quite like the character of the pastel. Okay, thank you.